The Cadets of Bergen County, the oldest and most honored drum and bugle corps in the world, and winners of 5 world championships in 8 years, know the value of teamwork. They know that in order for the group to be the best that they can be, each person, each section must do its part. Whether a drum corps, a high school or college marching band, an athletic team, or even a major corporation, the old saying is indeed true. An organization is only as strong as its weakest link. The brass cannot compensate for the woodwinds. The woodwinds won't be able to overcome the percussion section's shortcomings, and even the feature twirler, no matter how good, will not make up for a poorly planned and executed program. Every element must work in harmony toward the stated goal. No person or section can be neglected at the expense of the others. It is with this philosophy in mind that we approach this lesson. The percussion section plays a vital role in the performance of the marching band. Our goal is to share those techniques which we have found to be effective in order to help your marching percussion ensemble be the best that they can be. The percussion staff and drumline of the Cadets of Bergen County are an important and integral part of the 60-year-old Cadets organization. The value of their contribution to the Cadets' success can be illustrated in recent years by the 2 World Percussion Championships that they have earned since 1987. Led by instructor and arranger Tom Ongst, the percussion staff of the Cadets believe that a great deal of that success is a direct result of proper rehearsal techniques.
What's a key ingredient to the success of the Cadets Percussion Ensemble? I really believe that what makes our line successful is our rehearsal techniques. I don't believe you can rehearse one way and perform another.
What you see in practice is what you will see on the field. There is just no substitute for proper rehearsal technique and attitude if you want to see a successful show on the field. I think a lot of people, students, performers, and instructors alike, tend to downplay the importance of a good percussion section to a successful program.
I've judged a lot of drum lines in the past. I've seen some great talent, I've heard some great writing, but why doesn't it all work?
As instructors, we often take for granted that if we have talented performers and a great chart, we'll have a great section.
Well, it doesn't necessarily work out that way without good rehearsal techniques. Knowing how to rehearse your ensemble, knowing what to listen for and watch for is very important.
Even with the limited amount of rehearsal time available to many marching band programs, proper ensemble rehearsal techniques will show results.
The first step towards building a successful rehearsal program for your percussion section is to design a schedule that will work for you and your students.
It's important that time is allotted for proper sectional rehearsals as well as ensemble and full band rehearsals. This requires effective time management techniques and some discipline, but it can be accomplished even on a tight schedule.
Before diving into the charts, it's essential that your students go through a structured set of warm-up exercises.
The objectives of a good warm-up routine are to improve technique, to develop the player's hands and proper techniques of various rudiments, to relate technique to the music to be played, and to loosen the player's hands and wrists.
The best way to achieve these goals is through basic exercises. To improve the player's technique, it is important to work on different types of strokes,
like the legato stroke, which uses the continuous motion of the stick rebound on each stroke. The staccato stroke, produced by playing into the drum and stopping the stick on each stroke. And then combinations of basic rudiments. For instance, we use the staggered paradiddle exercise to expand the player's knowledge and skill of this basic paradiddle rudiment.
You can develop your own warm-up exercises using combinations of various rudiments. particularly those which are giving your players problems. Throughout the warm-up, the instructor should be watching to make sure that the players keep their fingers on the sticks and use proper motion. The stroke should be initiated by the wrist, then move to the fingers, then the arms. When working the sections in rehearsal, 6 key factors must be considered. Balance and blend. Does the individual play with his or her section and the total ensemble with respect to volume and pitch? Tempo. Does the section understand how to play at a uniform tempo? Do they know what to listen and watch for to maintain that tempo? Rhythmic interpretation. Does the section play together? That is their interpretation of the music uniform? Quality of sound. Do each of the instruments and players produce a sound that is consistent in quality with the others in the section? Listening. Do the students know how to listen effectively to the others in the section? Clarity. Is the section's play appropriate to the ensemble? It's an advantage to the percussion instructor that the drumline is as visually oriented as it is audible. While listening to the section, it's easy to watch for cues from the hands and feet to identify and isolate problems. There are basic components which affect balance and blend. They are stick height, playing zones, stick selection, and tuning. First listen, then look. The first and easiest cue to playing with uniform volume is the height of each drummer's sticks while playing. If the stick heights are uniform within each section, then the section is probably playing at a uniform volume. Stick height is the most important factor in playing at a balanced volume level. Students may not always interpret forte or mezzo piano in the same way, but they'll all understand that forte means to raise the stick 9 inches above the head on each upstroke. We use the following stick heights as rules of thumb. Fortissimo, energy level 5, 12 inches. Forte, energy level 4, 9 inches. Mezzo forte, energy level 3, 6 inches. This is the normal or starting level. Mezzo piano, energy level 2, 3 inches. And piano, energy level 1, 1.5 inches. We find that these recommended stick heights are appropriate for all types of drums in our ensemble, but you may want to experiment until you find stick heights that are appropriate for your line, keeping in mind the overall power of your drum line versus the entire band. The second factor which affects volume, or to some degree pitch, is the area where the stick strikes the head or the playing zone. Using playing zones is an easy way to adjust the ensemble's volume level. Volume decreases as the stick moves from zone 3 to zone 2 to zone 1. A snare line that may be playing too loud with the stick striking in zone 3 due to staging, drill design, or type of part can be adjusted by having them play in zone 2 or 1. Using this method, the part does not have to be altered or cut. The third factor which affects volume is stick selection. For snare drums, the Cadets prefer the 17-inch Vic Firth. For multi-toms, several stick combinations can be used. Check out the differences in volume levels as we go from nylon to felt to puff. And for bass drums, we use either felt or puff. Another factor in assuring proper balance throughout the section is to take the time to tune on a regular basis. We like to tune the entire section at least once a day or before each performance. Although tuning intervals may be dependent on available time or materials, it is wise to tune as often as practical. A drum that is tuned too low will produce more overtones, causing improper balance in the section. There are several things to look for when tuning snare drums. First, make sure that the top head is higher in pitch than the bottom. If the bottom head is too loose, a thin, raspy, less articulate sound will be produced. The bottom head should be tuned no lower than a minor third. Second, make sure that the guts are touching the bottom head. You may also want to check the guts to be sure that each strand has approximately the same tension. Next, make sure that each drum is tuned to the same pitch. Finally, make sure that the guts are tight enough. Softly tap the top head while adjusting the tension knob until you hear a crisp snare sound. A good snare drum may not sound good close up. The sound you're looking for will be heard when you step back 50 to 100 feet. When tuning multi-toms, there are different things to look for. Be sure that each head is in tune with itself by tapping around the head while adjusting the tension rods. Check for correct intervals between drums. Drums 1 and 2, a major third. Drums 2 and 3, a minor third. And between drums 3 and 4, a whole step. Finally, tune each set of multi-toms to match the first. When tuning bass drums, the primary concerns are uniformly tuned and dampened heads. Be sure that the heads on each drum are in tune with themselves and each other. Next, check for correct intervals between drums. Bass drums should be dampened with foam or a patch to reduce overtones. We find that weather stripping from a local home center works well. As with volume, the visual cues to proper tempo are often more evident than the audible ones. In this case, you will be paying attention to their feet rather than their sticks. In the marching ensemble, it's important for the players to be trained to think of playing to their feet. The battery, the marching portion of the ensemble, should always rehearse with their feet moving. Tempo problems can be caused by poor hand-foot coordination, lack of comfort with drill and music, parts not written for the tempo, staging of percussion in drill relative to the rest of the band, overplaying, or poor listening skills. And remember, tempo problems should be considered for the individual player as well as the full ensemble. First listen, then look. Be sure that the feet are moving uniformly and in tempo. Make corrections to the tempo of the feet, then move up to the sticks. The use of a metronome, woodblock, or cowbell is recommended until the players feel comfortable with the tempo and can play together with minimal correction. Extreme tempos pose a significant problem for most drum lines and should be approached with caution. It's often the transition from normal to extreme tempos that cause a breakdown in the section's performance. One technique that works well is to play extremely fast tempos lighter and at a decreased volume. Playing lighter forces the student to concentrate more on technique and relaxes the hands and arms. Usually, you will notice that there is less pressure to force the tempo when the line is playing at a lower volume. The same is true for extremely slow tempos. Make sure you remind the students to play lighter and lower. Watch to be sure that they are really decreasing volume and not just playing tentatively. A good bass drum line will help hold the tempo together. It's important that you make the bass drum line concentrate on tempo and playing to their feet. If they're not holding the proper tempo, the entire ensemble and often the entire band will have a tendency to follow. How do you rehearse a piece of music at the proper tempo within the entire ensemble? We use a progression technique. Break the chart down into easily followed passages. For each musical phrase, begin with the individual and set the tempo with the metronome. Then add players, working from the center to the outside, using the same technique until the line is complete. As players are added, they should be listening toward the center. In rehearsal, it is often useful to place the multi-tones between snare drummers on similar passages until the entire line begins to feel the tempo. Continue to remind everyone to listen towards the center. This is particularly beneficial if snares and toms are playing unison parts. The same is true of the bass drum and cymbal line. From this point, there is no substitute for repetition. It's important that the section repeat each passage as well as the entire piece, until they feel it in their hands and feet. A good drumline learns to feel the music physically as opposed to just playing it. It's always a good idea to get them moving as they would in performance as soon as possible. As with balance, volume, and tempo, rhythmic interpretation by the individuals and the ensemble can be verified by visual and audible cues. The most important thing to do is listen to make sure that the rhythm sounds even. If it doesn't, there are 3 factors which may be causing the problem: wrong sticking, improper stick heights, or lack of technique. To correct these problems, first isolate the rhythmic passage that is giving the players trouble. Have each individual play that passage, making sure that he or she understands and feels the passage. Then, have the entire line repeat the passage over and over. The quality of sound of the percussion ensemble can be defined as the tone produced by each instrument and the tone of the ensemble as a whole. Assuming that the section has been tuned properly, the most common quality or tone errors by far are overplaying the drum and lack of technique. Overplaying distorts the sound, and without proper technique, there can be no control.
Ensemble percussion requires each performer to blend with the group, adapting his or her technique to that of the group. Again, overplaying distorts the sound of the drum, and the distortion will increase with volume.
Some technique factors to consider when you hear problems with the quality of sound of your percussion section are
Use of the rebound, keeping the fingers on the sticks, and proper use of fingers and wrist.
it's important to let the stick do the work. Check the stick heights you have established for the volume you expect.
Overplaying drummers will often be seen with little rebound in their sticks, forcing them to pull the sticks up higher than they should to produce the volume. Be sure that the fingers are on the stick at all times and that the student is letting the stick rebound from the head rather than pulling it up. Does the player's stroke begin with the wrist motion, then the fingers, then the arms? And most importantly, make sure everyone is listening to recognize and correct quality problems as they occur.
In most cases, the band will be listening to the drum line for their cues. And of course, you and your audience, or perhaps the judges, will be listening to the percussion ensemble. So, it is important that the percussion ensemble be taught what they should be listening for, both the good and the bad. As we discussed earlier, each section member should be listening towards the center of his or her section. It's important that the instructors point out which sounds are good and which are bad. Never assume that your students know that they have made an error or what an error sounds like. Most often, if they know a bad sound, they'll work to avoid it. Try to point out the sound of errors without singling out a player. Ask them, can you hear that? If they can't, have them play it again and listen until they hear the error.
Guys, make sure that you don't distort your taps. You have to listen to the quality of your taps and just not drop them in. Try it again one time, right-handed.
It is equally important that you point out the sound of proper playing as it occurs.
Much better. Does that sound better? Good.
Also, as a rule, the battery should never listen to the pit. The pit should always listen back to the battery. To be sure that the pit knows what they should be listening for, you may want to break down some phrases in the battery and have the pit listen to how their parts fit. This should be done both moving and standing still. Clarity is the glue which ties the percussion ensemble to the overall performance of the group.
You need to ask yourself, does it all make sense? Now, in order to assure clarity, it is important to answer these questions. is the section's play appropriate to the wind ensemble? Can you hear each section? Can you hear each note within a section? And do the parts fit with the tempo? The best way to check for clarity is to hear if the melody is apparent throughout the battery ensemble, even without the rest of the band or the pit. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, be sure that you're not asking too much of your available talent. Remember, in most cases, less can be better. A well-played part that is less difficult can be the answer. If your problems have not been corrected by the techniques that have been discussed here, don't give up hope. Look one more time for too many unison parts, overwritten parts, and overplaying. So, the key ingredients of rehearsing a successful marching percussion ensemble are proper scheduling, a structured set of warm-up exercises, balance and blend, tempo, rhythmic interpretation, quality of sound, listening, and clarity. Proper rehearsal technique and a good attitude give you and your ensemble the fundamentals needed to perform at its best. I'm Tom Ungst. Have a great rehearsal.
These techniques have helped the cadets of Bergen County earn 2 world percussion titles and 5 Drum Corps International World Championships in 8 years. We believe they can work just as well for you as they have for us here at the Cadets.